Well, hello everybody. Welcome back to the channel, Reading Ideas. Now, this episode has got everything. It's got everything. Honestly, oof, was it what a journey that this has been on for this. And I know some people are interested in history. I know that there's quite a lot of people on BookTube who homeschool, and there's a particular interested in women's writing or women's rights, and interested in war and museums. This yeah, it's got everything. I'll try and tell the outline of it fairly quickly. So I do metal detecting, and I dug up a little brass disc, and it said on it National Projectile Factory, Lancaster, and it had a number on. And then this led to a whole journey of me. I was invited to the local museum, Lancaster and Morecambe Museum, as part of the other stuff that I've found, but for the 100th year anniversary celebration, and I handed this in, and this was taken in on the day, and it's now part of the display that they've got on there. So this disc led to the discovery of an area in the town that I'd kind of seen, but the massive World War One projectile factories, and this was an entry token for a worker, probably a female worker, to go there, a munitionette. And in researching the token, I found a letter from a woman in Surrey, a teacher who quit teaching to go and work in one of these factories. It's discovered, and the local museum didn't know about this letter, so they have that. They have that now, and that's part of their display. So that's the reading idea. You'll get to hear in her own words her experience of this, working in this factory in World War One. Photographs of the place, unbelievable photograph of the ladies that worked there. How they were disciplined if they broke the law. I did an episode on it on my metal detecting channel, and I've snipped in some of that. But the reason that I've come around to it is I was out this weekend, and now there were two factories. One a projectile making factory, and another one a projectile filling factory. And I was out, and unbelievably, I found a token to this week. I found a token to the other factory. The National Filling Factory, Morecambe, was the other place, was the National Projectile Factory, Lancaster. And this is person number 3225. So probably a young lady working in the filling factory, could be out after church, sat having a bit of a lunch on this field in a very nice area. I dropped this, and that's where I found it. So this will be going to the museum too. So it's got everything in here. So I hope you'll listen to these ladies' World War One experience. I've just had the National Filling Factory, Morecambe, number 3225. Now it's windy. It's not going to be a coin. It's going to be, well, I don't fully know. You can just see some beading just on the inside. And if you turn it over, it says National Projectile Factory, Lancaster, the number 8022. I wonder what that is. Is that for a bomb making factory in Second World War, probably not First World War, but I'll check that out. That could be interesting. That could be a batch number, or it could be a person. Wow. And this is the thing that has caused the history. The National Projectile Factory, Lancaster, number 8022. And this is what's kind of sent me on a journey through the internet and the local museum. And oh my word, yeah. So let's see what this is all about, or what little bits and pieces we can pull together. Munitionettes were also called Canary Girls. Shells were filled with a mixture of TNT and cordite. These ingredients could react with your skin and turn your skin and your hair yellow, hence the term Canary Girls. The Munitionettes, or Tommy's sister, obviously this thing went on for years, so they earned different nicknames. Generally it would be not serious and would eventually go away, but you could also get TNT poisoning if it attacked your liver, and there were people that died during the war from that. There were cases of canary babies, babies born slightly yellow, obviously with the mother's pregnant, and gradually the skin went normal. Whether there was any long-term effects, who knows? Can't be exactly good for you though, can it? Well, this was an incredible find on the internet. So this has been posted in Surrey in the Great War, a country remembers. A Surrey Heritage Surrey County Council project. It was posted by Michael Page on the 28th of June 2017, and it's a letter that looks like it was provided by Sue James at Sutton High School. The letter is from Hilda Mary Collins. Hilda sent a letter back to the school, probably at the headmistress's suggestion, describing her life as a munitions worker at the new factory, the one that we found the token for. It was printed in the summer 1916 edition of the school magazine, by which time she was driving a lorry rather than working directly on the manufacture of shells. Hilda Mary Collins joined the teaching staff at Sutton High School in September 1905, aged 20, to teach gymnastics, swimming, physiology, hygiene, reading and later dance. From September 1914 she was teaching dance, and in 1916 she took a temporary leave from the school to undertake war work at the newly built National Projectile Factory at Lancaster, which opened in September 1915. And this is Hilda's letter. My original idea was to drive a crane, that is, a little overhead kind of lift which carries the shells from one end of the building to the other and deposits them anywhere they are wanted. But having watched the workings of that for an hour or so, I discovered that crane girls had half an hour earlier in the morning and half an hour later at night to work, which meant catching different trains from Miss Sharman, with whom I am staying, and different meals, and really couldn't be worked. So I asked to be put onto a machine, and there happened to be one quite near me, empty, so they said I could have that, and watch the girl next door for a day who was working one just like it. So my job is called radius noses. We point to the noses of the 9.2 inch shells. They weigh very nearly 2,000 pounds each shell, and they are special hand cranes for lifting them. It's a fairly complicated machine, I'm glad to say, and, as none of the machines seems to be quite true, one can sometimes get quite a lot of tricky work faking the shell to make it come out the right size. Each one has to be measured, stamped and gauged by an overseer before you can take it out of your machine and count you have finished one. To do time, you have to get 8 done a day, and then your rate of pay automatically rises from £1 to 28 shillings. When you do over 8, you are said to be working on bonus. I had a proud day 2 days ago and did 9 for the first time. An ordinary day or day shift is like this. Catch the 7:10 train from Morecambe. They have just started running special trains for us, going right into our station in the works. Change in a dining room cloakroom into caps and overalls, which room holds 800 girls. Buzzer goes at 7:30 and you start straight away. If you are lucky enough to have a good mechanic who has got a shell set ready for you. If not, you wait, patiently if possible. You continue ad lib from 7:30 a.m. to 12 noon, when there is one wild rush to various dining rooms. Mine's the 800 one, so you can imagine what it's like. It's impossible to describe it. Everyone brings her own food, as the canteen is not yet ready, and a teapot, and you can get hot water and something cooked if you like to bring it in a little dish, but I don't. What saves my life is that you can take your food outside and eat it in the unfinished parts of the building if you like. Otherwise, I should have been starved to death, like Tantalus weeks ago. Imagine 800 factory girls in one room with a glass roof. I don't think any doctor could give you a strong enough tonic to make you want your food under those conditions. At 1 o'clock, another buzzer, and you must give in a brass cheque received when you arrive in the morning, and receive another, and so to work from 1 to 5:30. That's a good stretch, isn't it? When you get half an hour for tea, and then there is another half an hour, 6 to 6:30, which is usually wasted. Another buzzer, another wild rush to check off, a free fight to get dressed, and a scramble for the 6:50 train. Luckily, from the workstation these days, or you have to walk a mile into Lancaster. One thing I must mention, because it is so typical of men legislating for women. Engineering laws say that workmen must not sit during workshop hours. So, would you believe it, since taking on women during the war, they have stuck to that rule. And although in most of the operations the women could sit for at least a quarter to half the time without any detriment to their work, it is not allowed. And over 2,000 women in consequence have to stand from 7:30 to 12 and from 1 till 5:30, with overseers doled off to see that they don't sit. Did you ever hear anything so scandalous? Mr. Leveson and all the women manageresses are working for their lives to get it altered, but, being a government rule, of course, it will take a year to move them, I expect. We have been working on Sundays as well, ever since the push has been on, and it seems likely that we shall go on. I am on night shift this week and took last night off, hence my ability to be sufficiently awake to write this letter. Until the last 3 days it has been cool, even cold sometimes, and generally rainy, but now we have added heat to the noise and smoke. It's occasionally beyond the bearing point. I've worn straight through 4 pairs of footwear, all more or less thick, in 3 weeks. One keeps on stepping on white hot steel, and no leather will stand it. I should have clogs, but my little Ford motor lorry may arrive any day now, so it does not seem worthwhile. You can't imagine what it will be like to be out in the sun and fresh air, after being shut away from it for 3 weeks. Not that I would have missed these 3 weeks for anything. It's a side of life I knew nothing whatever about, but the car will be a joy. I'm to have 3 sets of uniform and fetch and carry from the town and stations, the explosive factory at White Inn, and occasionally from the naval construction works at Barrow. Our factory, the National Projectile, is the biggest of the national factories constructed since the war, and is 1/4 of a mile in length and nearly as broad. The National Projectile Factory, Lancaster. In October 1918, 1 month before the end of the war, there were 8,656 employees at the National Projectile Factory, Lancaster. 47% of them women, 53% of them men. Lancaster was the largest NPF in terms of employment. The average was usually about 4,500. There were fewer women employed here, as shell forging was mainly done by the men. The factory was purpose-built in September 1915 on a site 33 acres between the River Lune, Caton Road and Lancaster Canal. Vickers managed this factory and also the National Filling Factory at White Lund. The empty shell cases were manufactured, which were sent by rail to the filling factories to be filled with explosives and fuses fitted. Altogether, the factory produced over 2 million shells. The White Lund explosion, 1st of October 1917. The fire started at around 10:30 p.m. on the upper floor of Unit 6C, which contained large amounts of TNT, the lower floor containing 12-inch shells partly filled. These exploded after about 20 minutes. The largest explosion of ammunition occurred 4.5 hours after the initial fire. 10 people, all men, mainly firemen, were killed trying to put it out. Casualties were low because the workers were in the canteen having their supper break and they were able to escape. 300 women were helped out of the charge house by policeman J. Johnson. There was some panic and a general rush for the gates, and lots of women were reported as moaning and screaming. Some ran through the gate on the Lancaster side and fell into the flooded marshes before being rescued. Others scrambled through the barbed wire enclosures. 8 women were reported missing the next day. They'd feared for their lives and gone back to their homes in other Lancashire towns. An account by Anne Spencer, aged about 11 at the time of the explosion, described how people gathered at the old pier on the seafront and watched exploding shells go over them. The windows had been blown out of the back of their houses in Morecambe, and shrapnel was found several miles away. She'd seen the girls who worked at the factory running terror-stricken past their house. Her mother had tried to persuade some of them to come into the house, but they were much too scared. It said some were said to have run as far as Kendal. That could just be an old tale. Several acts of bravery were subsequently rewarded. Mary Agnes Wilkinson, a telephonist at the Exchange in Cable Street, Lancaster, was awarded the British Empire Medal as she rendered invaluable service, proceeding to her post through the danger zone at great personal risk, despite being blown off her bicycle twice en route. 4 men were awarded the Edward Medal for their bravery, including Thomas Q, a train driver, and Abraham Graham, who shunted 49 ammunition trucks holding 250,000 live shells out of the danger zone to prevent further explosions. It took 3 days to secure the site. The factory never reopened. Workers were paid off and given a fortnight's extra wages. The Lancaster Munitions Tribunal. This special court was convened to deal with issues concerning the 2 munitions factories, the National Projectile Factory the NPF in Lancaster, and the National Filling Factory, NFF, in Whitelund, Morecambe. Both men and women appeared before the court, which met as required, often weekly, from October 1916 until the end of the war. It focused on a range of issues with safety of paramount concern. Of the 156 cases brought before the courts, less than 10% were women. The danger of explosion was ever present, and the works police were vigilant, making regular searches of the workers. 4 women were charged with having matches, cigarettes on their person in the National Projectile Factory. Florence Hall, aged 20, was caught smoking a cigarette in the factory. Her punishment was 1 month's hard labour. Florence Byatt, a co-worker, told her to put out the cigarette, but she refused. That was reported in the Lancaster Guardian, January 1917. Sarah Stretch, aged 19. Her crime was possessing matches. She had a £5 fine. She did not smoke, but used the matches to light her bicycle lamp. That was reported in Lancaster Guardian, January 1917. Ada Williams, 18, brought a cigarette into the explosive factory. She had a £5 fine. She was from Oldham, and that was reported in March 1917 in Lancaster Guardian. Elizabeth Halliwell, her crime was possessing matches. Punishment was 6 weeks hard labour. I'm guessing she didn't have the £5. She was from Bolton, and that was reported in Lancaster Guardian, March 1917. The maximum punishment was a £100 fine and 6 months imprisonment. The tribunal took into consideration the circumstances of the defendant and whether a message needed to be sent to the other workers to follow the rules. Obviously, similar punishments were given to the men. Fatalities. Obviously, it was incredibly dangerous working in there. The deaths, male and female, recorded at the NPF Lancaster and the NFF Morecambe. Unknown female, possibly Letitia Henderson, possibly from Ireland. Cause of death, poisoning by gas at the National Filling Factory, Whitelund. Died 1916. William Sanderson died of TNT poisoning in 1917. Sarah Ellen Thompson, aged 24, she died of scheduled industrial disease at the National Factory in 1917. Bertha McIntosh, 23, from Atherton, died of TNT poisoning at the NFF in 1917. James Smith, 43, died of TNT poisoning in October 1917. The unnamed woman was a friend of Isabel Clark, a munitions worker at the NFF. They filled 9.2-inch gas shells. The effect of the gas could be discerned by discoloration of the eyes, and this was detected in her friend and by the on-site medical staff just before the Easter holidays of 1916. When Isabel Clark returned from her holiday, her friend had died. There were 3 fatalities caused by cranes at the Caton Road Works. An inquest in January 1917 reported on the 3rd fatality. An electrical fitter, William Goodchild from London, lodging in Morecambe, was accidentally crushed by a crane driven by Sarah MacPhail. The fire and explosion at the National Filling Factory, Whitelund, Morecambe, was the worst disaster, as 10 men were killed and the factory destroyed. So you had to sign the Official Secrets Act before working in the factories. Gertrude Hardman, a 31-year-old widow and munitions worker, did speak out about the working conditions. She had been in the local employment exchange when new female recruits arrived for work at the NFF at White Lund. Hardman talked loudly to one of them so that all could hear her, saying, "You don't know what you are going to. It's terrible. Girls are fainting every minute. Girls are dying every day. They take them out and nobody knows anything about it." Hardman was arrested under the Defence of the Realm Act, DORA, and charged with making false statements. Witnesses in court repeated what Hardman had said. "There is a cemetery close by the factory where they bury them, and if you are going to White Lund, then God help you. They are dropping dead every day at the works and are being carried out." One witness who subsequently worked at White Lund said the stories of girls dying was false. She had never seen one. Another worker denied that girls were dying every day. Hardman's defence in court gave a picture of a respectable war widow with an 8-year-old son. She explained her actions by saying she had been ill and overtired, and that she had been at the exchange on business for her landlady with no intention of speaking out. It's quite possible that she said that to avoid a prison sentence. She was fined £5. Some munitionettes resorted to crime. 5 women were charged with theft in very different circumstances in 1917. Emily Pogson, aged 19, and living away from her home in Darlington for the first time, was tempted on 3 occasions by her colleagues' possessions, including a raincoat and shoes. She was sentenced to 1 month's hard labour. Emily Hodges from Bolton stole plates and cutlery from the canteen to provide for her weekend visitors. In her defence at Borough Police Court, she said that she could not afford to buy them and intended to return them after the weekend. Kathleen Mulligan, a young Irish woman, stole a box of explosives from her workplace, intended to take them home to show her grandparents the tools that she used. It was perhaps a naive act, but also dangerous. Mulligan was remanded, outcome unknown. Rosie Carling worked at the NFF. However, she was sacked when it was discovered that she was just 15 years old. She stole clothing from her co-workers with whom she shared lodgings on the seafront at Morecambe and fled home to Belfast. She was arrested and brought back to Lancaster to stand trial. She admitted her guilt. A schoolmistress from Belfast undertook to escort Carling home if the bench would set her at liberty. This was agreed, and she was bound over for £5 for good behaviour for 12 months. 3 munitions workers found alternative entertainment and a way of making some extra money. Margaret Wilkinson, alias Taylor, was convicted of keeping a brothel at 3 Barrett's Yard, Brewery Lane, Lancaster. Her sister, Fanny Spandley, and Minnie Martin, a lodger, aided and abetted her. 3 men found on the premises when the house was raided by the police were also charged with aiding and abetting. The police had the house under surveillance for several days. Each woman was sentenced to 2 months' hard labour. The men were fined £10 or 51 days hard labour if they could not pay. Well, I hope you enjoyed that. I certainly enjoyed putting it together. I'll put some links in the comments of sites and things that I've found helpful in putting it together. But I just wanted to, have a final word. The picture that will be up on screen now is of the people in the canteen at Lancaster Projectile Factory, the National Projectile Factory. So the person who used that disc that was used as a bit of a dog tag to identify them if the unfortunate happened could be staring back up at us now. I just find it absolutely incredible just looking at those faces now all long gone. 12 12-hour days having to travel there, while their brothers, uncles, fathers were off at the front or doing something else. Just makes your mind boggle. So, I mean, that disc, I found it in a field, so white was still on them, and perhaps they were out for a picnic, maybe after church. Who knows how it got there? Well, there's our history staring right back at you.